You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku, here today to bring you another episode of the pod. Before I go any further, two things. Number one, I was a guest on the Harsh Reality Podcast. You guys should check out the latest episode of the Harsh Reality Podcast Presents Koku. Check it out. Let me know what you thought about that episode. You know, hit me up, social media, whatever. Let me know what you thought about that episode of the Harsh Reality Podcast. Second of all, I want to acknowledge that the chat room was already popping before I even started the show today. Let me go through what was being said. Kevin K42 says, Dogecoins, baby, buy them now. I agree. Dogecoin, I view Dogecoin almost like how I traditionally view like a penny stock, except in this cryptocurrency game, this stuff changes. This game is different than the penny stock game, and so, you know, you could buy Dogecoin. Up until a few days ago, it was like 6 cents a coin. Today it's like 9 cents a coin, and some people are speculating, they won't be surprised, it's 20 cents a coin in another day or two. So this is your chance. Don't get left out this time, right? Hop on that Dogecoin. NYC Beauty says to Kevin K42, it will hit at least $2 by the end of the year. That'll be good news if it does hit $2. Black Excellence is here. Black Excellence says to NYC Beauties, I'm confident of that. The only way forward is up. NYC Sports Archives is also here today. The future is cryptocurrency, they say. The dollar is being devalued by Jim Crow Joe. NYC Sports Archive goes on to say, get these coins while they are still cheap. I bought some Cardano coins on Coinbase. I buy them on Doge every week. I have Cardano as well. I think Cardano is what, $1, $1.10, something like that. Still pretty cheap. You know, yeah, jump on that stuff, man. What I want to buy now too, just a disclaimer, just to be transparent, I want to buy into some Coinbase stock, but I don't see, even on Coinbase, I don't see where you could buy the Coinbase stock. So I want to buy, and I can't see it on Robinhood either. So if you guys have any tips on that, please let me know. Kevin K42 says, same here. I will not let volatility bother me. Life has its ups and downs, but I'm digging my heels into this one. The whole lot is scared of this. I think Visa is using cryptocurrency now. Yeah, Visa is using cryptocurrency. A lot of companies are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. Actually, I saw, what company was it? Was it Visa who was accepting Dogecoin? It could be Visa, I think, was accepting Dogecoin specifically. So it's you know, it's coming, and technology is how white folks really transfer wealth, by the way. Every generation, there's something that comes through technology. Go back to the 90s, it was the dot-com era. There's a way, if you get on the technology at first, and that's what they know. They know that a lot of people aren't going to get on that technology. They don't understand it. They don't up on it, right? So those who know jump on this stuff early. You know, look at the Winklevoss twins from Facebook. They jumped on the Bitcoin thing early. Those guys, I'm sure, are billionaires just in Bitcoin now, right? Like Machiavelli said on the Discord, you know, follow the paper, follow the money, and you'll see which coin to invest in heavily by who's talking about it. So we got Elon Musk talking about Dogecoin. So there's something to it. You got Mark Cuban talking about Ethereum. There's something to that. Now, Ethereum is much more expensive right now. But for those of us who are just trying to get our feet wet, trying to dig into this cryptocurrency game while this bubble lasts, you know, get in cheap on those coins. And like Machiavelli posted in the Discord the other day, get in cheap, hold it when it plateaus, right? Stock up on it when it plateaus, hold it, right, through the volatility or what have you, and hopefully you'll reap some good rewards at the end. Kevin Kerr says, but anyways, brothers and sisters, on with the business at hand for tonight's show. At the Bit of Medicine podcast, we'll be bringing a hot fire. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Help the channel grow. And everyone agrees. We have James Mensa in the house saying peace. Life with Nelly is also here saying hello, just now tuning in. Appreciate all of you for tuning in, right? But guys, seriously, that, you know, you have a little extra paper, a little extra bread, a little extra money. Hop on Robinhood, hop on Coinbase, what have you, and get you some crypto. Right now, they have some coins like I said, I look at them like penny stocks, pretty cheap, 6, 7, 8, 9 cents. And from what I understand now, there's a period of time where altcoins, so these alternative coins, they have a rise as Bitcoin starts to plateau. These smaller coins start to go up, right? And you gotta think of these things practically. You buy yourself 1,000 pieces of a coin at 6 cents, that's nothing, right? That's like what, $60? That's nothing to spend. What if that coin later on, maybe in a couple of years, goes up to $200 a piece, right? You got to think of it that way, you see? So get on that. By the way, I'm trying to find a way to buy Ripple. I know Kevin Care42 told me on the Discord, try using a VPN, right? But there's got to be a simpler way. I thought I found a simpler way, but it wasn't. It turned out that this one site that I was trying to use to convert Bitcoin to another coin, XRP, Ripple, it could be a phishing site, right? It could be a phishing site. So I you know, my what's this thing called? My antivirus told me, nah, don't mess with it. So I didn't. So you guys tell me a good app that's similar to Coinbase, similar to Robinhood. Just have to sign up on this one app, and in New York City in particular, right? Because for some reason you can't really buy XRP in New York from most of these apps. You guys let me know a way, especially if you're in New York and you've done it, let me know a way to be able to go forward and buy some XRP. I think that's like $1.40 now. There was a time when that was like 25 cents a piece. You feel me? So we got to get on that. We got to definitely get on our technology game as a people. That's why we don't really get involved in a lot of this stuff. We don't have someone trustworthy, right, that we know is knowledgeable, right, that can put us up on these new technologies early in the game. Right, early in the game. Like I just quickly before we started the show, I remember hearing some white folks talking about Bitcoin back when Bitcoin was like $1.75. I didn't understand this, so I didn't get involved. Because when you ask someone to explain it to you, no one could explain it to you. Yeah. Then you know, I forgot about it, and when I heard about it again, it was up to, it was over $10 at the time, if I remember correctly. Now look where it is now. If you had gotten in early, right, before that thing hit $1, and held it, now granted, it would have taken you about 10 years, but you'd be a multi-millionaire right now if you had enough pieces, enough coins. In the chat room, I see James Mensa saying, I'm having difficulty to buy coins. I do not know how to buy it and how to protect it to prevent hackers. James Mensa also said, I just started watching crypto channels. Well, James Mensa, I have the cure for you. You're in the right place. If you haven't done so already, James Mensa, you should join our, the Bitter Medicine Podcast Discord server, or the Discord, and you should check out the crypto channels that we have going on, right? Check out our crypto channels. We have a lot of information. Kevin Care42, for one, who's in the chat room right now, has posted a lot of information. Dorico Cooper Photography, who's usually in the chat, posts a lot of information. Machiavelli has posted information. So you need to find your way to the Discord. Well, okay, you have joined. Well, if you've joined, then you need to go through the links. There's a lot of information. Are you able to see the cryptocurrency channels? Yeah, you got to go through the channels, right? Go through off topic, go through the cryptocurrency channels. There's a lot of information. I learned a lot from those guys when I had them on the show. And subsequently, since that time, when they've posted, loads of information. So it's there. You got to go check it out, all right? The third and last thing I want to talk about before we start the show is I want to remind you guys that this show is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network you guys should be checking out.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Also, make sure to check out the Queen's Council Podcast here on KWAZ Radio. You guys also should make sure there it is. You guys should also make sure to follow KWAZ Radio on YouTube. That channel is about to do some interesting things. Just waiting for the right time, but that channel is about to do some interesting things, right? And you guys should definitely check out that channel, subscribe, click the bell for when new content is posted, right? And make sure if you haven't already, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to my channel. You'll see in the chat room, KWAZ Radio is posted. Follow us on YouTube. Daily Affirmations by Pauline is here. She says, appreciate you sharing the knowledge, sharing the wealth. You guys make sure to like and subscribe to her channel as well as NYC Beauties, etc. Right? So let's do it. Let's talk about this topic. This paper caught my eye for obvious reasons. Right? Does my screen look blurry? Does the text on my screen look blurry? For some reason, the resolution on my computer changed today, unbeknownst to me as to why. I thought I had it right, but I'm looking at this little thumbnail and it looks kind of blurry in the thumbnail, but on my computer it looks fine. So I hope it looks fine to you too. So this paper, The Ideology of White Supremacy by James W. Vander Zanden. We could tell from that name what kind of folk we're dealing with here. It has been now almost a century since Appomattox. Yet in many respects, even today, the South remains a land set apart from the nation. It has developed a way of life and its essentials common with all America, yet its uniqueness is inescapable. This has been not for want of sharp internal variations and contrasts. Perhaps no American region possesses greater internal diversity than the South in historical background, geography, cultural composition, economic structure, and political and social outlooks. Still pervading the whole, there has been an inner cohesiveness which has given the Southland its distinctive way of life. And central to this way of life in one way or another has always been the Negro. On May 17th, 1954, a large cornerstone of this Southern way of life was placed in jeopardy. On that date, Chief Justice Earl Warren delivered the unanimous opinion of our nation's highest court, quote, that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. In so doing, the Supreme Court raised upon the Southern horizon the prospect of a social revolution with considerable scope. But as the first year following the decision rolled by, and then a second, third, and fourth year, it became increasingly unclear as to what the nature or extent of this social revolution would be, or whether, in fact, it might not be largely abortive. The prospect of major changes in the region's racial patterns was perceived by the great mass of Southern whites as constituting a distinct threat. To this threat, they responded by resistance, unleashing a flurry of activity and a surging social movement. More than 90 segregationist organizations mushroomed across the face of the South, such as the Mississippi Association of Citizens Councils, claiming 65 chapters and 80,000 members. From Richmond to Austin, officials busied themselves with legal alchemy, frantically searching for a magical potion to escape the High Court's ruling, enacting in the process more than 196 new segregationist bulwarks. And communities such as Milford, Clinton, Little Rock, and Sturgis captured world headlines as angry mobs milled before desegregating schools, intent upon thwarting integration. So you see right here that, and this is what I tell folks, right? These folks are not some all-present, all-knowing group of people. A lot of that stuff is reactionary. But the thing that they understand, right? The thing that they understand, you got to get organized to execute a reaction. And that's what we're not doing. Look at what they did, right? The Supreme Court says what it says, and look what they did in reaction. 80,000 members in these organizations. You could bet money these are dues-paying members, by the way, right? They're immediately getting on board because they understand, to them, the number one enemy is us. And that's one of our problems. We don't understand that these folks see us as the enemy. Like Kevin Careford too says, the filibuster was started by Southerners. Absolutely, just wasting time, just ranting and raving, right? We have to understand getting organized. Knitting Southern whites together in their adamant hostility toward integration is a group of ideas revolving about the Negro. These ideas give the movement its ideological cohesion, the glue which unites the movement's members in a fellowship of belief. I like how you wrote that, right? What's the glue that's holding us together under one central, one organized belief? Underpinning the segregationist position are three ideological premises. One, segregation is part of the natural order and as such is internally fixed. Two, the Negro is inferior to the white, or at the very least, is quote unquote different from the white. Three, the breakdown of segregation in any of its aspects will inevitably lead to racial amalgamation, resulting in a host of disastrous consequences. You see this third one here? Let's read that one more again. The breakdown of segregation, any of its aspects, will inevitably lead to racial amalgamation, resulting in a host of disastrous consequences. See, these white folks understood that, right? But did we understand that? When we have our people going out there getting their ass cut, their head bashed in, talking about we shall overcome and civil rights this and integration that, did our people consider what desegregation would mean? What the result would be, right? What will be the disastrous consequences? And listen, some of those disastrous consequences are pretty simple. We hearing this should all pretty much know it just by looking at what's going on outside, right? We don't really own black stores in black neighborhoods. Can you name one genre of black business that you can say black folks run in any black community consistently? Where's the black dry cleaners? Where's the black, restaurants? Where's the black, except for, like in Brooklyn, for example, you have all these Jamaican restaurants and Trinidadian restaurants and stuff like that, but consistently, where is, the black grocery stores? Where's the black bookstores anymore? This is what we did when we pushed to be integrated with these folks. From time to time, various treaties have appeared subjecting one or more of these beliefs to searching scientific scrutiny. Here we can pause merely to note that regarding such a key tenet as inherent Negro inferiority, contemporary anthropologists and geneticists are agreed that such an assertion has not been scientifically demonstrated, while its racist overtones are blatantly false. Right? But the reason why you would introduce this kind of thought is the same reason why, in a court of law during a legal proceeding, a lawyer will blurt out something that has nothing to do with the court. But won't you smoking crack 10 days before, this car accident? And then, the other lawyer has to say, hey, yo, objection. But by that time, the jury and the judge have already heard this shit. And they can't separate themselves from that blurted out statement. They can't do that. That will linger and it will color, right, the proceedings of that trial or whatever. Right? And so what white folks do is they drop this nonsense, right? This scientific racism, right? About this skull sizes and this, that, and the other, right? But there's no scientific basis, but the work has been done. The average idiot European takes that and runs with it. And let me tell y'all something. For those of us who still work around these folks, most of those folks still carry that same feeling when they look at you and when they deal with you. And as a side note, a lot of black folks tend to want to rail against that stuff, and they're angry and they want to prove their intelligence. Fuck all of that. You know who you are. You know this is bullshit, so let them think whatever they want to think. But the thing is, and this is the last thing is, I'll say for now, you gotta be working to solidify your community. Don't waste your time out here trying to prove to these folks who and what you are. Let your works within your community, amongst and within your people, let that be the thing that speaks for who we are as a people. To continue, what is of immediate concern to us is that these Southern beliefs, correct or incorrect as they may be, have a potent living reality about them. They are alive by virtue of the fact that they are held by men, and by men who act on the basis of them. And I think because these are held by men and by men who act on the basis of, I think that's why a lot of black folks want to prove them wrong. Fuck that. Defend yourself. That's how you prove them wrong. Defend yourself. As an outstanding American sociologist, W.I. Thomas has noted, quote, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences, end of quote. Deeply embedded in Southern thinking is the firm conviction that segregation is inextricably rooted in nature and as such is eternally fixed. In seeking to convey their sentiment regarding segregation, Southerners have frequent recourse to such phrases as quote unquote instinctive or quote unquote a natural order and a universal law of nature. Thus, Louisiana State Senator W.M. Raynock, chairman of his state's Special Legislative Segregation Committee, declares, quote, segregation is a natural order created by God in his wisdom, who made black man black and white man white. My response to that is, well, let's keep that same energy. When black folks start to work and change the course of their current direction, right? And you start to feel the intensity of that change in direction, keep that same energy, Playboy. In the chat room, I see we have some activity. NYC Beauty says nothing has changed in this country called the divided states of America, but this day is different. The youth of this generation are not taking the BS. Black Excellence says it's too late in the game for black people to think we are still in a post-racial society. Obama was chosen to put us to sleep. NYC Beauty says back to Black Excellence, remember back during, I think, the late August into September 2001, the Durban conference in Durban, South Africa, the divided states of America was getting his ass roasted and was called a racist country. September 11th, 2001 happened and it was forgotten. That's absolutely true. I knew some folks who, and Kevin Kerber probably knows some of these same folks I knew too, who actually went to that in South Africa and told me and described for me the scene when America walked out, literally got up and walked out. KW Dawn 7 is in the room. Good to see KW Dawn 7. I know I wasn't here on Saturday to do the show, but I appreciate you guys tuning in today with me. KW Dawn 7 says Urugu needs miscegenation for their survival. Their population was decimated after World War I and World War II. Kevin Care 42 says, I remember that, and I also remember when China held captive one of their fighter jets and wanted an apology from the divided states of America. Also that year, George Bush Sr. choked on a pretzel while watching a football game. He said when he woke up, his dog was looking at him lovingly. Okay. NYC Sports Archive says, wow, never knew that happened. Right? So yeah, I mean, we don't, it's yeah. So to continue, and in his concurring opinion upholding the denial of admission of Virgil Hawkins, a Negro, to the all-white University of Florida. Quick question, wasn't Static Shock named Virgil Hawkins? The comic book character and cartoon character Static Shock, the black superhero, wasn't his name Virgil Hawkins? Right? And in his concurring opinion upholding the denial of admission of Virgil Hawkins, a Negro, to the all-white University of Florida, Florida Supreme Court Justice Glenn C. Terrell reasoned in a somewhat similar manner. The Citizens Councils have likewise given prominence to this position. A widely circulated pamphlet of the Mississippi Association asserts animals by instinct made only with their own kind. The fact that man is also a gregarious animal and that human beings everywhere and under all conditions of life tend to segregate themselves into families, tribes, national or racial groups only goes to prove that all human relations are regulated by this universal law of nature. All right. What do you guys feel about that statement? Do you guys resonate with that statement? It's a white guy saying it, but do you guys resonate with that statement? To continue. This premise is the lineal descendant of the antebellum position that slavery was based upon the laws of nature, an argument appearing early in the Southern ideological arsenal. In 1700, the first positive statement of the anti-slavery school appeared in Boston, written by Samuel Sewall, then judge of the Superior Court. His pamphlet, The Selling of Joseph, a Memorial, received wide distribution and influenced the progress of the anti-slavery movement throughout the colonies. The following year, John Safin replied to Sewall in a pamphlet entitled A Brief and Candid Answer to a late printed sheet entitled The Selling of Joseph. One by one, Safin sought to answer Sewall's arguments in what was probably the first written defense of slavery in America. Safin denied the general principle of natural equality as constituting the order of the universe. He suggested that Sewall had inverted, quote, the order that God had set in the world, who hath ordained different degrees and orders of men, some to be high and honorable, some to be low and despicable, some to be monarchs, masters, others to be subjects and to be commanded, servants of sundry sorts and degrees, bound to obey, yes, some to be born slaves, and so to remain during their lives, end of quote. The quote-unquote natural order position was a carryover from the pre-Enlightenment period. Social and economic inequalities were justified as part of the natural order and God's ordained plan for the world. Human servitude, economic classes, social estates, and even the different status of men and women were explained on this ground. The position had been strongly influenced by Aristotle and other Greek thinkers who had justified slavery in logic as conforming to nature. That's why I don't fuck with these Greek sodomite philosophers, right? Most of their thinking, their logic, comes from an African thinking anyway, right? In the chat room, Kevin K42 lets me know that Virgil Ovid Hawkins. Virgil Ovid Hawkins. What did I say the guy's name was in this piece? Virgil Hawkins, right? His name was Virgil Hawkins, right? Yeah, so Static Shock is named Virgil Hawkins, right? Just want to make sure. I thought I remember that, but I wasn't sure. And Kevin K says that Virgil Hawkins is a member of a fictional subspecies of humans with superhuman abilities known as metahumans, not born with his powers. Hawkins's abilities develop after an incident exposes him to a radioactive chemical. This event renders him capable of electromagnetic control and generation. Alter ego Virgil Ovid Hawkins. First appearance Static #1, June 1993. Team affiliations, Heroes, Justice League, etc. Yeah, the guy who is it McDuffie or Duffy? I think it's McDuffie. The black guy who created Static Shock and who was a huge part of the creation of the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons. He died young. I forgot his name. I think his name is McDuffie. He created that character Static Shock, and I'm certain his name in that character, Virgil Hawkins, has some significance to what we just read in this paper, right? Black Excellence says, white inferiority, I cannot call Neanderthal supreme, is dying, and that's why we are seeing them go to these extremes these days. Now they are trying to make black people the face of racism. NYC Beauty says, to me, the ancient Egyptians called the Greek philosophy philosophy, right? The argument was a mainstay in defense of slavery. It became an important bulwark in philosophy, in the philosophic defense that formed to meet the natural rights attack of the revolutionary period. The anti-slavery school had early advanced the position that slavery was contrary to nature's law. They frequently appealed to nature as a higher law that erode all man-made sanctions for slavery. In their thinking, they were influenced by John Locke, who held there could be no slavery under the law of nature. Rather, slavery resulted from the withdrawal of the protection of that law. The pro-slavery advocates sought to answer this argument by pointing to the state of inequality that existed in nature. Southerners such as John C. Calhoun argued that the natural rights position, holding that all men are born free and equal in a state of nature, was contrary to universal observation. Calhoun asserted that instead of being born free and equal in a natural state, man was, quote, born subject, not only to parental authority, but to the laws and institutions of the country where born, and under whose protection they draw their first breath, end of quote. You know, as I read this thing here, we just talked about the influence that John Locke had, who held there could be no slavery under the law of nature, right? Rather, slavery resulted from the withdrawal of the protection of that law. I don't know how many of you did watch this show, but it was this great show that if I was a writer, a black writer, I would patent some of the ideas of the show on this one show that involved someone named John Locke, who was intentionally named John Locke after this philosopher right here. And that show is a show called Lost. How many of you watched the show Lost? If I was creating a show, right, if I was a show writer, it's a shame I wasn't too. If I was a show writer, I would be dropping names of great Africans, right, as character names in my show, and taking some attributes of those great, you know, Africans in time and history, and including it into my character name. I know Spike Lee, I think, has done it in the past, but there's a way you can do it that can be so impactful, right, as it was done with John Locke on that show Lost. I just thought I'd throw that out there. To continue, Southerners such as George Frederick Holmes, an antebellum teacher in several Southern colleges, sought historical support for the natural law position. He argued that as slavery existed, quote, in a very considerable degree under all forms of civilized society, we may consider it a necessary consequence of social organization, or may even go further with Aristotle, and with Aristotle regarded as a necessary constituent thereof. And as this is admitted to be natural, so we may consider its consequences to be consonant with the laws of nature. Others sought evidence of an empirical sort from anatomy and ethnology, seeking to demonstrate that inequality, not equality, was the natural order of the universe. So that's out of curiosity. I know most of the folks listening today are black folks. As black folks listening to this show and listen to that statement, right? Do you think the basic function of the world is inequality, not equality? Or is that just how Europeans view the world, right? Because we do know that Africans had that Ubuntu paradigm, right? Where it was about the group and the equality of individuals within a group, right? So is that just a European outlook? And I guess the last part of that question is, how useful is it to know that these Europeans, these Eurasians, see the world basically, right, that things that the world basically demonstrates inequality, not equality, right? I know the answer. I just want to see where you guys are. As the slaveholder viewed nature, variety, and inequality characterized every work of the great creator. In a word, nature was governed by unerring laws, quote, which command the oak to be stronger than the willow, and the cypress to be taller than the shrub, end of quote. Closely allied with the natural order position was the elaborate biblical argument formulated in defense of slavery. It was no wonder that in 1863, the Presbyterian Church South met in General Synod and passed a resolution declaring slavery to be a divine institution ordained by God. What say you, Presbyterian folks? Today, segregationists have taken over the antebellum scriptural defense of slavery in its virtual entirety, finding in it an ideological bulwark for the segregated order. The quote-unquote natural order argument continued as a majority support of the caste order in the post-bellum period, finding frequent expression in the defense of the Southern racial structure. Thus, in 1907, Bishop William Montgomery Brown, prominent official in the Protestant Episcopal Church, could write that race prejudice was, quote, a deep-rooted, God-implanted instinct, end of quote. Put that on a shirt, underdog, right? You believe in God, then you should believe in your race, right? And that the, quote, Anglo-American citizen is prevented by a law of nature from allowing the Afro-American to be associated with him in the government of these United States. I gotta remember to repost that quote, right? So you're here, and you're talking about, we built this shit. Well, the reality is, these folks are telling you right here, they don't believe in that because of their law of nature. Doesn't allow the black American, your ADOS, your FPA, to be associated with this white boy in the government of these United States. What did Kevin Kerr say about Obama earlier? Accordingly, Bishop Brown reasoned, quote, from every point of view, the conclusion is unavoidable that it is not only right for Anglo-Americans to recognize the color line in the social, political, and religious realms, but more than that, it would be a great sin not to do so. Slave and master both praying to the same God, asking God to help them. Help them get, one side, help them get out of slavery, and the other side, help them to keep their slaves. And you remain a slave. Who's that God really for? Who's the God really for? The slave and the master cannot pray to the same God. But y'all ain't hearing me though. Y'all ain't hearing me though. A corollary of the quote-unquote natural order argument holds that, quote, members of each race prefer to associate with other members of their race, and they will do so naturally unless they are prodded and inflamed and controlled by outside pressures. Now I gotta highlight that one. Listen to what this says here. The corollary of the natural order argument holds that members of each race prefer to associate with other members of their race, and they will do so naturally unless they are prodded and inflamed and controlled by outside pressures. When you hear black folks say they don't like to deal with other black folks, why is that? Why is that, right? We are being told not to associate with our own folks. This is why that whole notion of black folks shouldn't be around each other, I think Neely Fuller pushes that idea. It's total nonsense, right? It's total nonsense. The things that happen when black folks tend to be around them, right, is usually something prodded and inflamed and controlled by outside pressures. Black folks aren't savvy enough to sidestep those things. And so that's why you see there's problems when we congregate a lot of times. But if we congregate under a theme, understanding why we need to come together, who is the enemy, who do we need to face off against, you wouldn't have those problems. Instead, black folks, because they don't understand who's their enemy, when they come around each other, they find the enemy within the group. And that's why nonsense happens, right? You're being told to hate one another. In your music, you're being told to hate your women. In your TV shows, you're being told to hate your men. You have to understand that. Thus, U.S. Senator Sam J. Ervin of North Carolina reasons that racial segregation is not the offspring of bigotry or prejudice, but the product of a basic law of nature, the law that like seeks like. Man finds his greatest happiness when he's among people of similar cultural, historical, and social backgrounds. You guys who are with me today listening to this show, you guys are black folks, correct? How do these recent words right here, right? How do these words right here resonate with you? Likewise, for the Southern, white segregation is not a moral question. Former South Carolina Governor James F. Barnes declares, quote, "It is useless for me to argue whether the racial instinct for segregation is right or wrong. It exists," end of quote. This argument became prevalent following the Civil War as a justification for the establishment of separate facilities for Negroes and whites, including separate churches. The Methodist Episcopal Church, South, had made an effort following the war to retain their Negro congregations. When this failed, Atticus Green Haywood, then president of Emory College in Georgia and later a Methodist bishop, sought to explain the situation in these terms. Quote, "If nature asserts herself, in nearly all of the states, the conferences are now unmixed. In all of them where the Negroes are sufficiently numerous to form separate organizations. As oil and water diligently shaken together in a vessel mixed for a time, but without chemical union, so these two races mixed in the conferences for a time. When the mixture settled, lo, the oil and the water touched, but were distinct. Instinct is supreme. The colored brethren were restless till they had their own conferences. It was the same instinct, for instinct it is, that led to the formation of a number of African church organizations in the North long ago. This instinctive disposition to form church affiliations on the color basis may be wise or unwise, but it is in them, deep in them. Tendency is strengthening all the time. This instinct will never rest satisfied till it realizes itself in complete separation. As Guion Griffiths Johnson has pointed out, this was a convenient theory as it relieved churchmen of the burden of applying the ethics of the golden rule to the Negro. Except for extremists, they did not deny the concept of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, but the theory of race instinct made it possible to hold that the full implications of brotherhood could not apply to the Negro. Quote, "If brotherhood could not be applied, it was an easy step to the conclusion that brotherhood should be applied." Southern churches, both white and Negro, thus tended to become the most militantly race-conscious institutions in the post-war era. As Malcolm X said, the most segregated hour, and he said this in the 60s, the most segregated hour in America, right? The most segregated hour in America is Sunday during church time. In the chat room, I see Kevin Care42 says we have brainwashed by the ideology of European philosophy. Eurasians just want to control and quantify everything. Everything has a purpose. There is no competition. Flower, grow, live, and die differently than a bird. Black Excellence says, I love my people always. I will never choose an outsider over my people. Look what happened to the bad wench, Stacey Dash. Black first and always is the law. Don't break it. Yep, don't break that law. NYC Beauty says black first. NYC Sports Archive says hashtag B1 or black first. All right. If you guys are here, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell to be notified when I'm on, when I upload new content. To continue, the notion of intimate racial inferiority and superiority became a prominent public issue in relatively recent times, probably not earlier than the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Physical differences were known to exist between groups of mankind before this time, but the notion of the biological inferiority of particular groups was absent. Thus, in the early period of American slavery, Negro servitude was justified not only on biological grounds, but rather on grounds that the Negro was a heathen and a barbarian. When Bishop Berkeley visited the colonies around 1730, he found the notion prevalent that, quote, being baptized is inconsistent with a state of slavery, end of quote. This belief among the slaveholders probably constituted the main obstacle to the conversion of the Negroes, as the slaveholders feared that baptism would alter the status of the slave. Jenkins suggests that this idea probably grew out of the old patristic theory, which held that slavery was based upon man's original sin rather than upon nature. Thus, as long as the slave was a heathen, slavery was lawful. But the sacraments washed away original sin, and the basis of slavery fell. Slaveholders' apprehension apparently was so great that in 1727, the Bishop of London, who was in charge of missionary work in the colonies, sent a pastoral letter to slave masters declaring, quote, Christianity and the embracing of the gospel does not make the least alteration in civil property or in any of the duties which belong to civil relations. But in all these respects, it continues persons just in the same state as it found them. Likewise, a number of colonies enacted statutes to set at rest the apprehension of the slave owners so that the work of religious instruction might proceed. Right? So look at that quote right there. By the way, this guy is a Bishop of London in 1727. That means it's an Anglican. It's an Anglican genre of Christianity. I grew up in the Anglican church, by the way. He says Christianity and the embracing of the gospel does not make the least alteration in civil property on any of the duties which belong to civil relations. But in all these respects, it continues persons just in the same state as it found it. Slave and slave master cannot worship the same God. Cannot worship the same God. This Anglican is telling you if you were a slave when we grabbed you, we don't care how much gospel you get. Changes nothing. Likewise, a number of colonies enacted statutes to set at rest the apprehension of the slave owners so that the work of religious instruction might proceed. So they still push the religion on you. By their religious standard, it's supposed to change your status. They gave not one damn about that. You still remain a slave. And they pushed their white supremacist religion on you too. As time progressed and the Negro was converted to Christianity, the heathen or infidel buttress no longer constituted a satisfactory defense of slavery. Gradually, then, the biological argument came into prominence. As Montague has indicated, There, the Negroes' different physical appearance provided a convenient peg upon which to hang the argument that this represented the external sign of more profound, irremediable mental and moral inferiorities, right? Your blackness is seen from a mile away. Makes it easier to peg you in their nonsense. The situation was not too different in South Africa. Macroni states that the earliest practice in South Africa was to free slaves that had been baptized. Such a practice, however, constituted a costly economic burden and challenged the status system. So there's your answer as to why this Anglican bishop, right, could say some shit like that. There's your underlying answer. And you should have known that was the underlying reason. We still gonna keep our jobs, we're gonna spend time, quote unquote, Christianizing these heathens, right? Our ancestors, right? You guys who own them will still be able to carry on because nothing changes. No matter how much gospel we give them, nothing changes. They're still your slaves, right? So both of us gonna make our money. You still gonna make your money, we gonna make our money. We ain't gonna introduce no bullshit where it changes the status from a moral aspect or from a religious aspect, and now they become freedmen, right? And now you lose money. No. We still all gonna make our money. Don't forget to give you 10% every Sunday now. Quote, when in 1792, the question was explicitly raised by the Church Council of Stellenbosch, whether owners who permitted or encouraged their slaves to be baptized would be obliged to emancipate them. The matter was referred to the Church Council of Cape Town for its opinion. That body replied that neither the law or the land nor the law of the church prohibited the retention of baptized persons in slavery, while local customs strongly supported the practice. Thus, the ideological bulwark, originally symbolized by religion, became symbolized by race. Notions of innate Negro inferiority apparently arose rather early in the colonies. Overtones of this thinking was found in Safan's answer to Sewell, and Bishop Berkeley, in his visit to the colonies, noted that, quote, an irrational contempt for the blacks as creatures of another species who had no right to be instructed or admitted to the sacraments has proved the main obstacle to the conversion of these poor people. End of quote. As Jenkins has observed, quote, the inferiority of the Negro was almost universally accepted in the South by all groups of pro-slavery theorists as a great primary truth. Some writers, such as George S. Sawyer, funny enough, I grew up with a guy named George Sawyer, a prominent member of the Louisiana Bar, sought to establish Negro racial inferiority by means of the historical argument. The social, moral, and political, as well as the physical history of the Negro race bears strong testimony against them. It furnishes the most undeniable proof of their mental inferiority. In no age or condition has the real Negro shown a capacity to throw off the chains of barbarianism and brutality that have long bound down the nations of that race, or to rise above the common cloud of darkness that still broods over them. You know, a couple weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, I think, the Pro-Black Perspective had a debate with Alma Bookman from Twitter. You guys, if you're on Twitter, you follow me, you follow the Pro-Black Perspective. You know, there's a circle of people who kind of see each other's tweets all the time, and Alma Bookman is one of those people. Jam is another one. If you know who Jam is, then you know. And in the chat room of that debate, I noticed that there was someone who asked a question of, can we hijack this religion, this European religion, this Christianity? Can we hijack it as black folks and turn it to our means? And that just shows you That just shows you how painfully stuck we are on this nonsense. It just shows you how painfully stuck we are, that we think we can take this thing that is anti-black and turn it into a positive from the inside, right? And make it ours. Like, you cannot. It fundamentally isn't for you. Make sure you guys like the video. I see we have more viewers than likes. Make sure you click the like button. It takes a second to do, and it helps us immensely going forward. All right, make sure you click the like button. In the chat room, KW7 says, hold on, I think I missed someone. Black Excellence first says, what I'm hearing also is Eurasians warping reality and creating their own. They're like the man behind the curtain. Don't pay any attention to. I agree with most of that statement, Black Excellence. They do create their reality. The problem is they make us subjects in their reality. And because of that, we can't ignore it. We need to counter by creating our own reality that has a basis in power. KW7 says you have black males getting a coaching job at the UNC talking about that. They are proud that their wife is white. You know, I was going to create a skit about that. I was going to make a skit about that same thing. I mean, what a goddamn embarrassment. Hubert Davis gets a head coaching job at North Carolina, UNC. And just out of nowhere, this Negro starts saying, I'm proud to be the first black guy who's a coach, and I'm proud of my white wife. And it's just like, what? Like like you could almost hear a record, right, screech. Like, what? But this is what we have out here. This is what we have out here. Kevin Careford says, this is no different than the Arabs threatening conversion or death. Exactly. Now, again, you know, a lot of what we talk about is Christianity, because Christianity was the most recent of the slave trades, or trading of the enslaved, right? But before that, you know, we had to do with the whole Arab slavery. Kevin Careford says black people are more proficient in the Bible and Quran, but still get no respect. Dorico Kubo Photography is here. I mentioned you earlier. He says, peace, family. Kevin K42 says the KW7, he used to be a player for the Knicks back in the 90s. I'm not shocked, though. What was terrible was that Hubert Davis did not even need to say that. He was just showing out for his master. Absolutely. Absolutely. NYC Beauty says, like, share, and subscribe. Kevin K says, to me, Hubert Davis looks like a Manchurian candidate. Dorico Cooper Photography says, I hear Uncle Ruckus. Yeah, he's like a young Ruckus. You know? I mean, it was just out the blue. I've never, I can't remember the last time I've heard a coon just blurt out he's proud of his white wife. Okay. But damn. Others, such as Samuel George Morton and Dr. S.A. Cartwright, sought physiological support for their belief. In the early 1840s, under the impetus of the work of Dr. Josiah Clark Knott, a physician of Mobile, Alabama, the theory of a separate origin of the white and Negro races began to gain currency in the South. According to this view, the two races were endowed with a different original nature. This nature was viewed as permanent, incapable of physical or intellectual alteration. Not only was the barrier between the races insurmountable, but nature was seen as setting limits beyond which the Negro was totally incapable of improvement. Thus, quote, no philanthropy, no legislation, no missionary labors can change this law. It is written in man's nature by the hand of his creator. You know, while I was reading that, I was thinking no lanterns, no Kryptonians, right? But yeah, I mean, these guys had their shit down to, I mean, almost religious and almost scientific. The principles of pluralism can counter to the teachings of the Christian churches. Accordingly, pluralism was denounced by the church authorities as advocating a theory of natural causation while denying God a place in the universe. Nevertheless, pluralism gained adherents in intellectual and academic circles. In the decades following the Civil War, three major ideological positions can be distinguished on the issue of Negro inferiority. The first group held that the Negro was innately inferior to the white, and that while as a race Negroes might achieve a certain degree of progress, still they could not do so only under the pressure and guidance of the whites, although never reaching the white man's intellectual, cultural, moral, or physical level. You know, have you guys ever seen a redneck in his natural habitat? And these guys want to talk about intellectual, cultural, moral, or physical level. Have you ever seen a West Virginian? Come on. Come on. But we know better. But what we don't need to do is waste time arguing with these folks about it. What we need to do is quietly plug along, work on the three markets that I talked about at the start of the year: our health, our wealth, and our relationships. We need to work on the things I'm constantly talking about: building a strong and powerful nation. That's it. That's it right there. All right? Don't worry about these clowns, but know what they're thinking. See, if you know what these folks are thinking, and if you don't poo-poo it away from your consciousness, if you know what they're thinking, you'll be very careful on how you interact with them. You will limit your interaction as much as possible. It should be close to zero. Right? But if you ignore what these folks think, what I'm reading about right now, if you ignore that these folks don't think like that, and don't tell me the newer generation think differently, they're different. No, they're not. They're raised by the older generations. Their beliefs are cultural at this point. Culture is transmitted, it's passed down. Right? It was the doctrine of permanent Negro inferiority. This position viewed the Negro as essentially a completed product of evolution and capable of being assimilated by whites. Enoch Spencer Simmons, a member of the North Carolina Bar, articulated this position in these words, quote, "While we give the Negro credit for much and believe him capable of more progressive advancement in the way of learning and civilization, yet we know he is an inferior race who under the most favorable conditions will not and cannot ever achieve what his white friend can, because it is not the purpose of God, the great wise creator, that he should." You know? But y'all want to sit up in church with this asshole. Right? Kevin Care42 says in the chat, West Virginia and Kentucky, two of the poorest states. I think they are part of the Appalachian meth, heroin, and fentanyl rules the day there. But America, right? These folks will tell you that these folks are superior to you. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, what have you, but these folks are still superior to you. So I say, fuck it. Don't argue with the shit. Don't argue with this shit. Just build. Dorico Cooper Photography says West Virginia. Ha ha ha. Biscuit work. Food chain. All right. Before I continue any further, let me take a quick station ID break. I'll be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Make sure you guys also check out the Queen's Council podcast as well as the others just mentioned, only on KWAZ Radio. Before I go further, I want to thank you guys who have donated to the Cash App. Sometimes I forget to mention it. In fact, oftentimes I forget to even mention that there's a Cash App. Make sure you guys donate to the Cash App whenever you can. It's $ Bitter Meds with a Z at the end, Bitter, MEDZ. I want to thank you guys who have donated to the show. The proceeds are used to improving the Discord or some aspect of the podcast itself. I think the next thing I'm going to use donations for is to get the podcast back on the podcast apps that you guys like to use, like Spotify, Castbox, etc. I used to have it there before, but there's a cost associated with that, so I got to get back on SoundCloud, be able to upload all of these videos. I'm uploading so many videos a week now that I have to get back on SoundCloud, upgrade the subscription that we had there, and I'm going to start putting all these live streams back on RSS feed and back onto your favorite podcast app, so you guys can listen to these shows on your phone, driving in the car to work, working out, what have you. Okay, so we will be back on those podcasts, the major, in fact all of them. We'll be back on all of them soon, once these donations hit a certain point. So again, I want to thank you guys who have donated. I appreciate you, and just look out for more work to be done on the show to make it better. Okay, so I appreciate you. So to continue with the paper, this group believed that there existed a biological ceiling above which the mind of the Negro could not be improved. The mind of the white, it was alleged, did not attain its full growth until some 5 to 10 years after the full growth of his body, while the mind of the Negro matured several years sooner than his body. Accordingly, there existed an ever-widening gap between Negro and white mental capacity during adolescence and the 20s. E.H. Randall of Virginia typified this point of view. Quote, "I would place the matured capacity of the black at about 18 and of the white at about 30. This makes a wide difference in the benefit the two may receive by training." That's an interesting thing to read right there, because it is true in African societies, we read this on the show in the past, that we don't baby, in traditional African society, we didn't baby the young folks, right? We had a rite of passage at a certain age, around maybe 12, 13, somewhere around there, and we gave it to them. We let them know what the world was from that age going forward. We didn't baby them, right? Whereas white folks baby folks up until about 30. If you go back in your memory, there was an incident at the last Olympics, I believe it was, where I forget that white boy's name, but he was like always the runner up in swimming to the other white boy, Michael Phelps. All right, if you guys remember his name, posted in the chat room. And they went somewhere. Was it Brazil? They were in Brazil or something, and they went and broke something at a gas station or something like that. And all these folks in America, these white boys in America on TV, were saying, "Oh man, these are just kids doing kid hijinks and all this type of stuff." Lo and behold, this dude that they're talking about was 30 years old. a grown-ass man, right? Now, of course, they're not really subscribing to this idea that you're a kid till 30, but they use it as a convenient truth, or a convenient lie, I should say, right? They use it in such a way, right? But we don't do stuff like that. It's not in our nature. It's not in our genetic memory. By the time you hit a certain age, around 13, not to say that you're a man or a woman and you're viewed that way, but you have moved into some early form of adulthood. And you're treated that way. You're given certain responsibilities, certain knowledge, certain understanding, right? The other part of that statement that I just read is that this is why they look at our youth, 18, 17, 18, and call them men. Even as low as 12, like Tamir Rice. They call that 12-year-old boy a man. And if you ever listen to the recording of the call to the police regarding Tamir Rice in the park playing with a toy gun, the caller, that piece of shit, told the dispatch he looks like about 21 years old. He knew damn well I was a 12-year-old kid. You know, a 12-year-old child. Tamir Rice didn't look anything like some 21-year-old kid, right? But this is what they do, right? This is what they do. Before I continue, Dorico Cooper, I had mentioned you earlier in the episode. We were talking about Dogecoin for a bit. And I was talking about Coinbase is supposed to go public soon. And I can't find how to buy Coinbase stock. I looked on Robinhood. Maybe you might know. Also, I've been looking, as you've seen the Discord, I've been looking to buy Ripple, XRP. But in New York, you can't buy it in New York. So I'm trying to find the proper app that just sells Ripple and sells it, you know, also in New York. By the way, why do you think it is you can't buy it in New York? My instinct is that it's trying to prevent all these black folks in a big city like New York from being able to get in on that wealth. But you tell me. Also, I think I remember that Ripple started at 25 cents a piece, right? Is that correct? 25 cents a piece, and now I think it's up to like almost 150 a piece. Let me know if all that is true. But if you have an idea where you can buy Ripple without any restrictions on New York City, please let me know in the chat room. NYC Beauty says, I had responsibilities starting at 11 years old. Those responsibilities are still imprinted in me. Rico Cooper Photography says, I have been to 49 of the 50 states. West Virginia is one of the saddest and most toxic nuclear and mining places I've ever visited. Goes on to say Coinbase goes public tomorrow. Yeah, I know it goes public tomorrow. Does that mean we can't get in on it now? I thought there was always an early offering. Yeah, I saw Ripple in Japan was like $167 a coin or something like that. He said Ripple is bigger overseas. I saw that. Like $167 in Japan. I was shocked by that. So if you have any ideas or strategies how folks listening, not just me, but folks listening can get in early on that Coinbase. I read a headline of an article today that said that Nas, I guess Nas has some money in Coinbase, and he's set to become like a billionaire or something when it goes public. So yeah, so let me know. Is Dogecoin, Black Excellence says Dogecoin is now at 11 cents. Is that true? Wow, that thing is moving. All right. Well, I'm in there, so I'm in there. I'm good, and I still plan to get some more. All right, it's up 50%. Great. Make sure you guys get in. 11 cents a coin is nothing, people. Right? $110 can get you 100 pieces of that thing. You know, just get in there, right? Get in while you can. Get in while it's cheap. Before you know, it's over 60,000 if luck will have it, right? Like Bitcoin is, and then you can't afford to get into it. Some writers took great pains to demonstrate that the Negro did not, quote, have sufficient and the right kind of brain to enable him as a race to reach that high standard of education, refinement, and civilization enjoyed by the white man. By the way, this is why these clowns, because they pass this kind of thinking down, this is why it's hard for them to believe that black folks built in Egypt. And black folks were some of the smartest people in science and medicine and all that. They have to believe that some goddamn alien had to come and help for that to be the case. And because they've bought into this type of bullshit. It was alleged that the skull of the Negro was thicker than that of any other race, and the gray matter and the number and depth of the convolutions less than that of the white race. Some even suggested that the brain of the Negro and its physical characteristics approached that of the chimpanzee. Several scientists, such as Robert B. Bean, published findings attempting to show that the skulls of Negroes were smaller than the skulls of white men, and that the brains were less convoluted and otherwise deficient. In this instance, Bean's work was exposed by Franklin P. Maul, who repeated Bean's measurements on many of the same specimens and found that Bean had completely distorted his measurements and conclusions. And see, that's the thing that gets me. The idiot white folk will hear this previous talk about smaller skulls and all that, right? But they somehow wouldn't hear that this jackass was distorting his measurements and conclusions. The belief in innate Negro inferiority was widely held throughout the South and frequently set forth by Southern spokesmen and ideologists. Thomas Nelson Page, Southern novelist who romanticized the antebellum plantation system, firmly believed in, quote, the absolute and unchangeable superiority of the white race. A superiority not due to any mere adventitious circumstances, such as superior educational and or advantages during some centuries, but an inherent and essential superiority based on superior intellect, virtue, and constancy. These guys never talk about the black folks who came in and taught them science and how to bathe and all that stuff. It's just amazing. He found nothing of value emanating from the mind of the Negro. Quote, in art, in mechanical development, in literature, in mental and moral science, and all the range of mental action. Right? And I've heard some of your Negro voices saying this type of stuff. What's my man in Harlem who had that video that went out there that was on some the Africans never built anything, never built a damn thing, didn't have roads, didn't have houses and all that stuff. There's a popular Harlem black preacher who said that dumb shit. If you guys remember the name, posted in the chat. Prominent Southerners such as John Temple Graves and Henry W. Grady likewise adhered to this position. Some carried the position to the point of an unreasoning fear of the Negro, which amounted to a phobia. Serious proposals were advanced for removing the Negro from the South and transporting him to Africa or a 49th state. Rabid anti-Negro books and tracts made their appearance, such as Charles Carroll's The Negro, a Beast. I want to read that now. Is that weird that I want to read that book now? The second group, while convinced of Negro inferiority, was less certain as to the permanence of this inferiority. In appreciating this position, it is important to realize that even as late as the early decades of the 20th century, it was widely believed in scientific circles that culture was a genetically inherited rather than an environmentally transmitted property. A belief now discredited, but still prevalent in popular thinking. Accordingly, the Negro was viewed as retarded, as thousands of years behind the white race in development. You know what's funny about that? There was a time not that long ago where a black kid will do like some psychological test or some standardized test or whatever. And these tests, which no one ever questioned, which is just ridiculous, right? Our ancestors didn't question these. And by ancestors, I'm talking literally like our grandparents and great-grandparents. Never questioned these tests. But these tests were not suited to the black child. They were not suited to his tradition, his culture, or any of that stuff. And so the black child wouldn't do well. And the first thing, based on the results of the tests that these white doctors and psychologists or what have you would give you, and some black ones too who followed in the steps of these white boys, they would say that this person was retarded. And these folks were not retarded, right? But once you label a person as such, you kind of determine what their destiny is going to be, unless they themselves say F you and give you the middle finger to that diagnosis, right? You can determine their fate in life. That person can now become the drug user, the drug dealer, the gunman, right? The person robbing folks, killing folks, because you've made them feel less than. You've kind of determined them not to be great, right? In the chat room, Dorico Cooper Photography says they are doing a traditional IPO. Okay. They're doing a traditional IPO. Okay, so that just means they're issuing stocks. Black Excellence says it's up 50%. I think he's referring to Dogecoin. Dorico Cooper Photography says buy alert STX. Buy up to $5 is the invest to get on now to profit off Coinbase IPO. That's what I'm talking about. So you're saying if I go to Robinhood, right, should I be able to find alert STX on Robinhood? No. Just let me know that, and I'll be on that up to $5 worth right after this show. If you guys are listening, don't let that pass you by. NYC Beauty says it's the Atla Ministry in Harlem. Atla? Okay. I couldn't remember that name, and I don't remember the black guy's name, but that guy was out here talking about, you Negroes didn't do nothing, which is a lie. Right? To continue. However, this second group was not prepared to rule out the possibility of the Negro catching up with the quote-unquote superior race. Philip Alexander Bruce, with ancestry in the old planter aristocracy of Virginia, clearly set forth this point of view in 1889 in his The Plantation Negro as a Freeman. Quote, whoever seeks to judge the moral character of the Negro without having any knowledge of him from personal contact is very apt to be misled by the notion that he is merely a white man in disposition from the Creator as endowed with a black skin. Plainly, as his complexion distinguishes him from the whites to the eye, it will be discovered after association with him for a great length of time to be one of the smallest points of difference between him and the Anglo-Saxon. Remove all trace of the color with which nature has painted his rugged countenance, wash away every stain that darkens it, and the moral traits that seem to be peculiar to his race would cause him still to occupy an original and unique position. How far these traits will be modified in the future by the transmitted influences of a more refined and elevated condition remains to be seen. It may be true, as some ethnologists believe, that the highest personal type of civilization is far more a result of inherited instincts and knowledge than of innate superiority of race. Bruce viewed the Negro as essentially, quote-unquote, illiterate, credulous, feeble in judgment, weak in discrimination, a child in his habits of dependence and self-indulgence, and some of you Negroes live like this today. Let's keep it real, right? Accessible to every temptation and with little ability to resist, without a hope of aspiration above his physical pleasure. Now, let's be real about this right here. Some of you aren't black people. Some of you are Negroes or other N-words because you are the creation, or you follow the creation of this white boy, right? Some of you literally follow the creation of this white boy. And so you act like children, dependent, right? Self-indulged, right? And no more ambition above just physical pleasure. And we got to be real about it. Some of our people are this way. He was alarmed that, quote, the influences that are shaping the character of the younger generation of Negroes appear to be such as must bring the blacks in time to a state of nature. It was essentially a paternal point of view, one which held that the Negro race could be elevated only under the guidance and supervision of an advanced civilized race. So this is where you have guys like Tommy Sotomayor, who was on that bullshit about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, talking about black folks under white folks had a good coach. They had better coaching. That's how this sellout Negro was talking, right? But what do you expect from a sellout Negro? He will say some sellout shit like this. What I'm saying when I read this part earlier is, if you really look at the habits of a lot of black folks, let's keep it 100. It's one of dependence. And a lot of our folks are just being drawn by physical pleasure. What am I going to eat today? What am I going to drink? What am I smoking? Who am I fucking? Etc., etc. And we got to be real about that. And we have to cut that shit out. A third group rejected the point of view that the Negro was an inferior, or sought to skirt the issue as a major consideration. Instead, they held that the Negro race was different from the white race. The difference, quote unquote difference, was essentially one of social heritage, a heritage in which the white had obtained advantages, the Negro disadvantages. As a consequence, the races could be distinguished on the basis of traits peculiar to them. For example, the nature of the moral code and practices generally prevalent among them. This position more or less characterizes the thinking of Edgar Gardner Murphy, an Episcopal clergyman of Montgomery, Alabama, and Bishop Atticus G. Haygood. Haygood writes, whenever the Negroes are in large numbers, there, we may be sure, are their characteristics. If they live in the midst of another race, there also are the characteristics of that race. There are differences as well as resemblances, simple but important fact not always considered. The differences as well as the resemblances go deeper than the skin. Whether the Negroes are superior or inferior, whether better or worse than white people, it will nevertheless be admitted by candid persons that a company of Negroes are not, in any state or city or town or country hamlet in the United States, realized in the inmost consciousness of men to be just the same as white people. Of the three positions, the first was by far the dominant. The latter half of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the doctrines of innate Negro inferiority gained considerable impetus. There are three of the more important factors contributing to this development might be singled out. First, the appearance of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species in 1859 had an extraordinary influence upon social thought as well as upon the world of science. It laid the foundations for modern biology and demonstrated the effects of selection upon human beings. While Darwin's theory was hotly defended, attacked, and modified, race theorists built upon their conception of race on its framework. They sought to be connected, by the way, Darwin's Origin of Species is like a fundamental reading of biologists, right? Right, which I am one, right? And the thing about that is, all of these white folks who came through the years after Darwin's book came out hold that book dearly, right, in their practice. So this is why Watson and Crick, I forget which one is still alive, but this is why he is such an asshole, and he thinks that there's a genetic, even though he's one of the guys who stole the idea from a white woman, by the way, that DNA is formed into a double helix structure with complementary base pairing. He can't find a gene that shows that proves some type of scientific inferiority of black folks, but he's one of the leading voices on this idea. In fact, they had to like fire him and all kind of stuff. I think it was Watson, right? They had to fire him, if I'm not mistaken, from several different high positions, because he wouldn't stop going on about this genetic inferiority that black folks have, right? And he is a world-renowned scientist. I'm pretty sure a Nobel laureate, right? And now again, this is what happens with propaganda. This is what happens when propaganda becomes cultural, right? Even so-called learned people will spew some dumb shit. But this is to these folks' advantage. We don't deal in propaganda, and that's our disadvantage. We need to start working on positive propaganda for our own people, right? So that it becomes cultural, so that it's transmitted, it's passed down from generation to generation. It laid the foundations for modern biology and demonstrated the effects of selection upon human beings. While Darwin's theory was hotly defended, attacked and modified, race theorists built up the conception of race on its framework. They sought to connect race with the evolution hypothesis and to arrange the races in a hierarchy, from which the thesis followed that the races could not be of equal endowment. In a period increasingly oriented towards scientific thinking, such a position appealed to many as lending quote-unquote scientific support for the existing racial structure. A second factor adding currency to the doctrine of inherent Negro inferiority was the prevalent belief in this period in the preponderance of biological influences on human characteristics and behavior. In psychology and related fields, various instinct theories of behavior were widely held. The importance assigned instincts were reflected in McDougall's Social Psychology, the most popular text in its field. The importance of learning and culture in the determination of human characteristics and capabilities have been suggested in the early theoretical work of such men as Franz Boas, Charles H. Cooley, and George Herbert Mead. But in this latter orientation found the going heavy. Even as late as the 1920s, the situation was quite confused. The social sciences were preoccupied with the nature-nurture controversy. But research on race was clearly undermining the theory of innate racial superiority and inferiority, while the various instinct theories were falling into general dispute. The illustrative was the re-examination of the Army's intelligence testing program during World War I. Originally, the finding that Negroes scored lower than whites had been given a racist interpretation by C.C. Brigham. Later analyses, such as Kleinberg studies, showed that Negroes in some northern states scored higher than whites in some southern states. Still, sociological thinking was confused. Surveying the available evidence on the issue in 1927, P.A. Sorokin, in his Contemporary Sociological Theories, could write, the perfect agreement of all these tests, the historical, cultural, the mental, the absence of geniuses, especially of the highest rank, and the superiority of the mulattoes seem to indicate strongly that the cause of such a difference in the Negroes due not only, and possibly not so much, to environment as to hereditary. You see right there is a part of the mulatto problem. Enough said. It was little wonder then that such beliefs had wide credence among the general population. A third factor giving impetus to the doctrine of Negro inferiority was Anglo-Saxonism, a product of modern nationalism and expansionism. For a time, it had a particularly powerful grip upon American historians represented by such men as Herbert Baxter, Adams, and John Fiske, who exalted the role of the Anglo-Saxons in history. The Anglo-Saxonist cult was allied with the notion of inevitable Anglo-Saxon quote-unquote destiny, a notion reflected in the quote-unquote manifest destiny position. The doctrine found wide acceptance in the South, widely popularized by such Southern spokesmen as Henry W. Grady, who found little difficulty linking Anglo-Saxonism with white supremacy. Right? Isn't Henry Grady a big name in Atlanta? Isn't most black folks in Atlanta born, giving birth to in Henry Grady Hospital in Atlanta? I think when I was in Atlanta, I even saw this hospital, Henry Grady, right? So Henry Grady had to say this: the Anglo-Saxon blood has dominated always and everywhere. It fed Alfred when he wrote the Charter of English Liberty. It gathered about Hampden as he stood beneath the oak. It thundered in Cromwell's veins as he fought his king. It humbled Napoleon at Waterloo. It has touched the desert and jungle with undying glory. It carried the drumbeat of England around the world and spread on every continent the gospel of liberty and of God. It established this republic, carved it from the wilderness, conquered it from the Indians, wrested it from England, and at last, stilling its own tumult, consecrated it forever as the home of the Anglo-Saxon. The theater of his transcending achievement. Never 1 foot of it can be surrendered while that blood lives in American veins and feeds American hearts. The domination of an alien and inferior race. Y'all better know what these folks think of you. Today, among the great mass of Southern whites, the belief in Negro racial inferiority is virtually universal. However, in strictly biological terms, the thinking is vague and unclear. An array of traits are attributed by, quote-unquote, by nature to the Negro, traits which are believed to be inherent in the race, which define the Negro as an inferior. These alleged traits include hold on a second, let me highlight this. These alleged traits include unreliability, laziness, thriftlessness, immaturity, immorality, criminal inclination, ignorance, incapacity for sustained mental activity, and special susceptibility to certain diseases. The belief finds sophisticated formulation among some Southern intellectuals. Representative of such expressions are the following. History is not so much the record of the events of nations as a whole as it is the chronicle of the contributed civilizations of the superior races. The Negro race, though one of the oldest, has never built a worthy civilization. So they know that we are the oldest race, right? But they then tell a lie, has never built a worthy civilization. That was President D.M. Nelson of Mississippi College, Clinton, Mississippi. There's much evidence to show that the Caucasoid people, the white race, have creative talents and abilities that have not been demonstrated to any considerable extent by the Negro race. The white and Negro races differ in talents and abilities that are hereditary. That's Dr. W.C. George of the University of North Carolina Medical School. This is where Hubert Davis will be, and I'm proud of my white wife, right? The strength of the belief in Negro biological inferiority tends to vary inversely with educational level. In fact, among white Southerners with some college education, there is a tendency to supplant the belief in inherent Negro inferiority with a belief that the Negro is merely, quote, different from whites. leaving the issue of innateness, or quote-unquote innateness, either open or denying it entirely. Kenneth Cass, Greensville, South Carolina mayor, expresses this point of view in a remark to a Life writer, quote, "I don't want to argue it that Negroes are inherently inferior with anybody, but I don't go along with that. It doesn't quite sound Christian to me. They're human beings just like everybody else." Still, white Southerners are in general agreement that Negroes are quote-unquote different from whites. Mississippi Senator John C. Stennis sets forth this sentiment to the U.S. News and World Report. Quote, "The traditions of the races are greatly different. The environment and background of the races are greatly different. Actually, there are great social and emotional differences that quickly come to the surface when aroused. Their mental processes are different." Now, this shows you how the game is played, right? A lot of black folks will push back against that statement. I won't. I won't. Why do you think I won't? All right? We're different. That's just a fact, right? The average white Southerner, when specifying the manner in which Negroes differ from whites, frequently singles out an array of differences. These have been summarized by Thomas R. Waring, editor of the Charleston SC News and Courier, in a highly publicized article in Harper's Magazine. In it, Waring attributes to Negroes higher incidences of venereal disease, a lower cultural level, more casual marital habits, and considerably higher rates of illegitimacy, a greater crime rate, and a lower average intellectual development. I want to highlight that for this paper I'm writing. Among whites of lower and even some middle socioeconomic class stations, one elicits highly emotional responses lacking Waring's level of literary sophistication. It should be understood, however, that the white Southerner holding beliefs such as these is not dishonest or engaged in deliberate deceit. And I agree with that. A lot of these fools are just dumb, and so they go along. They just go along with whatever they've heard from their grandpappy. His ideas conform to his personal experience and observation, selective as they may be. The Negro's living standards, though rising, are still low. Rates of extramarital households and illegitimacy, of tuberculosis and venereal diseases, and of crimes against persons and property are considerably higher among Negroes than whites. And results of standardized national IQ achievement, reading and related tests from Virginia to Texas show consistently lower scores for Negro than white children when taken as a racial group. The average Southern white is not aware of the multitude of social and cultural facts and forces which have fostered these situations. Rather, he associates them with the visible physical characteristics of the Negro and concludes the Negro is inherently inferior, or at the very least, different. And these same white folks are cracked out, drugged out, looking inbred, if not inbred in fact. But hey, you know, the Negro is superior, is inferior. Okay. This is why we gotta work, man. Not because of what they say or think necessarily, but because we need to just have our power base. Remember, they do the shit that they do based on how they think. Right? So for example, there's this asshole cop who shot a fella in I think it's Minnesota, right? Claiming that they thought they were holding a taser. So you tell me, who's the inferior one in that paradigm? A taser that these cops carry, I saw a picture of it, is bright yellow and black. It's much lighter than a gun, right? They're taught to put the taser on the non-dominant hand side. So when this person instinctively used their dominant hand, I guess the right hand, to pull this gun, they knew what they were doing. But they use these types of rhetoric that we're talking about here to say that black folks are inferior. Oh, it was a mistake. And our quote unquote inferior asses are supposed to believe this. For if the Negro occupies a position in the biological order lower than the white and nearer to the animals, or if his basic personality and behavior pattern is quote unquote different from that of the whites, a pattern which whites commonly define as socially unacceptable or reprehensible, then a segregated order is in no need of moral defense. Accordingly, from the white point of view, the Negro does not enjoy rights, but merely privileges. These privileges are seen by the whites as testifying to his generous, unprejudiced nature and as satisfying the dictates of Christian charity. You have no rights, you have privileges. Privileges meaning that they gave you these things, right? And they gave it to you because they're such great Christians. In the chat room, a lot is going on since I last looked in. Dorico Cooper Photography says STX is a coin. Okay. But as much as you can, buy as much as you can up to $5 a coin. Oh, it's $5 a coin. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. I thought you were saying earlier oh, I see what you're saying. So buy STX, it's $5 a coin right now. Buy as much as you can, and when Coinbase goes public, right, you're saying that you'll get a profit off of it by buying that coin. Okay, so I'll buy that coin then. KW Don 7 says if Urugu never came into contact with Africans, they'll be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. You're absolutely right. Draco Cooper Photography says traditional IPO means they got their early investors. Yeah. A-credited investors, everyone else just get share at IPO price. Right. So that's how Nas, I guess that's how Nas became an early investor. And that's why they're saying when it goes live tomorrow, he stands to gain. I guess he put so much into it, he stands to gain to become a billionaire or something just off of that. SCX market cap is going up when Coinbase IPOs, so take advantage of bull run. Got it. KW7 says Urugu has never been the innovators of civilization. The root word of civilization is civil. They have never been civil to any other group on planet Earth. That's nothing but a word, right? Put that on a t-shirt. All right? That's nothing but a word right there. Kevin Care42 says Coinbase won't let him buy STX. Draco Cooper says most of us don't want to be sovereign. We are comfortable being in the big house, or at least in the gated community with Mzungu. Draco Cooper said something, but he took it back. Kevin Care42 said thank you, I guess, to whatever was said before. What was said before? Kevin Care42 says Binance, it's not available in New York. Yeah, Kevin Care42 is in NYC like I am, and you'll learn, Kevin Care, when you start to do a deep dive. A lot of the apps that they tell you, that people suggest on social media to buy, like Ripple and stuff like that, or Coinbase, you cannot get those in New York. Dorico Cooper says use a VPN. So I'm gonna have you guys type, Dorico, type into the chat room this VPN usage. So on your phone or on your computer, I guess, maybe, use a VPN so it doesn't give away your locality, I guess, and use the app in that way. A lot of these apps ask you, or websites, they ask you for your phone number, and it's from your phone number that they can tell you're not, you know, that you are in New York and that they can't offer those services to you. And again, I asked the question, why do you think they're shutting out New Yorkers in this way? Right? Why do you think they're shutting out New Yorkers in this way? Let's finish this paper up as we're 2 hours in. Gunnar Myrdal, in his monumental study, An American Dilemma, postulates the existence of a struggle within the heart of America between its democratic creed of equality and justice and its segregated caste-like system. What Myrdal failed to comprehend is that for most Southern whites, there is no such moral dilemma. The doctrine of Negro inferiority, or quote-unquote differences, serves to place the Negro beyond the pale of the American democratic creed. This is illustrated by an experience I had while walking in a Negro section in Augusta, Georgia. As I was passing a number of white children who were hurling stones and insults at a nearby group of Negro children, I inquired of the former, quote, "Why are you throwing stones at those children?" End of quote. They replied, "Mister, they ain't children, they're niggas." Closely associated with the doctrine of Negro racial inferiority is the belief that interbreeding or crossing between races results in inferior offspring, right? According to popular superstition, the offspring of interracial unions inherit all the bad and few of the good qualities of the parental stocks. In turn, these bad qualities are allegedly passed on to future generations, during which time the good qualities are further sifted out through potential interracial unions. The net result is the mental and physical deterioration of the group. Well, that I think that's I think that's true of our misogynists. You go and you have children with these lot, right? You take out their greatness. As a matter of fact, I always remember Dr. John Henry Clark talking about Gaddafi, saying that you know, Gaddafi used to tell Arabs leaving Libya to go study abroad in Europe that if you go and you live with a European woman, just stay. Don't come back, don't bother, because you won't create a strong Arab between the legs of a European woman. And that's the kind of mentality we need to have, right? Articulate current expression of this belief is represented in the following statements. We publish to the world that we protest the attempts being made to desegregate the races because we believe such would inevitably lead into a hybrid monstrosity that would defy the word and will of God. All right, this is a resolution of the Missionary Baptist Association of Texas, composed of 300 East Texas churches. History shows that nations composed of a mongrel race lose their strength and become weak and indifferent. They become easy prey to outside nations. And you know what history they're talking about? They're talking about what Sheikh Anta Diop was talking about and others. They're talking about the mulatto problem in Africa and how that led to the downfall of a lot of those early African nations, right? The intermingling of breeding stock results invariably in the production of scrubs or mongrel types and the downgrading of the whole herd. Same principle applies with equal force to the process of human development. Citizens Council pamphlet. Southern thought on racial amalgamation can be traced to the antebellum period. A number of prominent Southern antebellum scholars, most noted of which was Dr. Josiah Clark Knott, advanced the theory that the races were not intended to mix, not argued that the offspring of whites and Negroes would speedily merge into one or the other of the original types or become extinct from defective organization. According to Knott, quote, the superior races ought to be kept free from all adulterations, otherwise the world will retrograde instead of advancing in civilization. After the Civil War, the belief was invested with new, highly accentuated emotional qualities as it became linked with the cult of white womanhood, the quote-unquote woman of the pedestal pattern. The Negro male was depicted as ruled by an inordinate sexual craving for white women, making all Negro men potential rapists. Through the years, it has fostered a deep-seated anxiety among whites for the safety of their women. This fear has been played upon by white supremacist leaders in the current controversy who have exhorted whites that the ultimate goal of the NAACP is to, quote, is to open the bedroom doors of our white women to the Negro man, end of quote. At the turn of the 20th century, the miscegenation doctrine had been elevated to a cardinal position in the Southern ideological structure. In 1904, Edgar Garner Murphy could write, quote, the doctrine of race integrity, the rejection of the policy of racial fusion, is perhaps the fundamental dogma of Southern life. And in 1910, Sutton E. Griggs wrote, quote, the problem of keeping Negro blood out of the veins of the white race is the paramount problem with the Southern white man, and to all other questions, whether economic, political, or social, are made to yield. For the Southern white, the prospect of racial intermarriage or amalgamation is viewed with considerable alarm. It appears to him as a real imminent prospect, the epitome of evil and danger. For him, it is a taboo, the taboo of taboos. Throughout the world, societies have erected about sex their most heavily charged emotional and coercive sanctions. This, the South has done with interracial marriage, and as a true of taboos in general, the South has invested this taboo with mystical properties, viewed as inextricably bound with obedience to it. It's the fate of humanity and society. To violate the taboo is to desecrate the sacred Southern white womanhood, and to unleash inevitable tribulation. As the Southerner views interracial marriage, it is something which cannot be grasped by secular or rational understanding. In this sense, the belief is actually magical in character. The taboo on intermarriage is focused upon the white woman. It covers not alone formal marriage, but illicit sexual intercourse with Negro men. But the taboo does not operate with the same intensity to bar illicit intercourse between white men and Negro women. This is what I told y'all. Like, I talked about this in an episode long ago. You had the TV show Supergirl, Supergirl. And in the first season, they had built up this whole storyline where she was supposed to start dating this big black dude, Mekhi. What's that kid's name? It's not Mekhi Phifer. Mehcad Brooks, who was in the Tyler Perry film with the weird hairstyle, right? And they saw that the numbers for that show were dropping. They quickly they crash landed a white boy into that last episode of the first season to make sure she was with a white guy. They do not like to show images of white women with black men. They mostly prefer to show you white men with black women. And you could see that in advertisement and everything. All right. To continue. In the latter situation, the white blood is saved from pollution by Negro blood, since paternity does not establish parentage with the certainty of maternity. an offspring, regardless of the lightness of complexion, is naturally assigned to the Negro group. In short, a white woman has from an interracial union a Negro child, but a Negro woman from an interracial union never has a white child. And you bed wenches lay up here, and I'm not taking the pressure off you Negroes, you sellout buck broken Negroes who lay up, but you bed wench Negro women, right, can never have a white child. It is the doctrine of an interracial marriage that in the last analysis constitute the South's main defense of the segregated system. Firmly embedded in Southern white thinking is the belief that the breakdown of segregation in any of its aspects would lead to the cultivation of such attributes and social intimacies as would inevitably result in intermarriage. As the white Southerner perceives the segregation issue, the question remains, quote, would you want your sister or daughter to marry a Negro, end of quote. For many in America, the Southern beliefs outlined here are offensive, evoking strong emotional reaction. But this merely underlines the fact that the contest between the forces of integration and segregation is to a considerable measure a conflict of ideologies. The current school desegregation controversy has served not only to magnify the differences in ideology within America, especially between sections, but to buttress, intensify, and solidify them through the heightened consciousness engendered by the resulting struggle. In the years since World War II, the movement within American life to realize for Negroes the full benefits deriving from the American Democratic Creed has gained increasing momentum. But as has been true throughout history, movements of social reform have encountered opposition and resistance. Movement has begot counter-movement. Ideas have begot counter-ideas. Thus, William Sumner Jenkins, in his pro-slavery thought in the Old South, observes of the antebellum slavery controversies, quote, slavery had defenders whenever defenders were needed. The exact nature of the defense was determined to a great extent by the degree to which and by the way in which the welfare of slavery was endangered, end of quote. Today, the story is being repeated with the lineal descendant of slavery. Segregated institutions. That's a hell of a line. Today, the story is being repeated with the lineal descendants of slavery. Segregated institutions. This guy was from Duke University. Today, the story is being repeated with the lineal descendant of slavery. Segregated institutions. You know, I know what he means in the context of this paper, but if you think about what's going on with the lineages, right, of slavery, right, the ADOS, the FBA, right, they are creating segregated institutions as well, which I thought was I think that's an interesting thought, right? So that was the paper. It's called The Ideology of White Supremacy by James W. Vander Zanden. This paper was written in 1959, right? 1959, which was mean that it was written less than 100 years after the emancipation of the enslaved Africans in America and the Caribbean and whatnot. That's crazy, man. What did you guys think of the paper? I know I got some stuff in the chat room to check out. Well, what did you guys think of the paper? I know in the chat room there's a lot of talk about investing more than the paper, but that's all good if we're getting good information. So let me go back and figure out where to begin. Kevin Care 42 says to Derica Cooper Photography, it asks for your address too. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It asks for your address and it asks for your phone number. So I don't know how the VPN helps in that matter, but if you guys know, I mean, please put me on. Kevin Care 42 says I'm on a VPN too. So Kevin Care 42, are you able to buy Ripple and stocks in Coinbase and all that because of your VPN? Derica Cooper Photography says, yeah, they're getting high tech with the technocracy. That's true. Kevin Care 42 says to us, Derica Cooper, but eventually it will happen here. And Derica Cooper is saying exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, it will, but what will the prices be when they do? He is right. They're trying to keep the little man down because there's a huge wealth transfer going on right now. A huge, I think he meant wealth transfer going on right now. And the money is up for grabs. See, that's how I looked at it. I asked myself, because I remember when the SEC came in and stopped Ripple from being bought, or at least bought heavily, because I remember Moise Watkins and Claudia Jordan and them talking about Ripple, you know, a couple years back. And at the time, it was like, I want to say it was similar to Doge, where it was like 5 cents a piece. And then it jumped up to like 25 cents a piece. And last I heard it was like 30, right? And then I didn't hear anything about it. When I started hearing about it recently, it crossed, you know, it came up to $1, right? And I wondered then, well, damn, let me see if I can get in on this now at $1, because $1 is still pretty cheap. But you can't get it in New York. And the only thing I could think is the reason for it is that they know that there's all these black folks in places like New York, especially. And if you allow all these black folks to put a little money into, you know, these penny coins, like I call them, these altcoins, you could change the dynamics in these big cities quickly. If that thing goes the way it looks like it's gonna go, you can change the dynamics of black folks quickly, right? Kevin Care 42 says Cardano, USD, ADA, USD, CCC, coin market cap, currency in USD. I don't know what this is supposed to be saying. To watch list 1.4341 plus 0.1128 up. Okay, so yeah, Cardano. Okay, now I understand. Cardano, which is traded as ADA, is up 8.5%, right? Which is good, because when I bought it, I think it was just at $1, and now it must be close to 150 now, right? Derica Cooper Photography says, ooh. KW Dawn 7 says Urugu has, so KW Dawn 7 is talking about the paper. I appreciate you. Urugu has deleterious genetics, so agree that there should be no miscegenation with them. Yeah, I mean, have you guys seen the Uish people with their Bell's palsy and all this old shit? Have you seen a British person ever? Yeah, stay away from that. Derica Cooper Photography said this is an awesome paper. Appreciate you, Derica. Kevin KW Don 7 says Urugu is a hypocrite when it comes to miscegenation. They want to prevent black males from accessing their females, but they want to violate black women with immunity. Absolutely. Kevin K42 says, let's get the likes up on this. I appreciate that. He says he's not able to buy XRP or STX. KW Don 7 says the devil's final trick is to give you his woman, Elijah Muhammad. Kevin K42 says now on Robinhood you have to buy 10 or more. That dollar buy is not working anymore. Now on Robinhood you have to buy 10 or more. What are we talking about, Kevin K? You have to buy 10 or more pieces of a coin or something? That dollar buy is not working anymore. Yes, the Kevin K again. The Uish also have something called Tay-Sachs disease, which is a nerve degeneration. Let me tell you something. I wouldn't want to be them folks for nothing in the world. The shit that messes them up, I wouldn't want to. This is a part of the reason why there's so much drug use amongst those guys, right? The drug use that you see in black society is because of the oppression. By the way, speaking of oppression, the next paper I do on Thursday is we're gonna look at the oppressor's pathology. So make sure you guys tune in to next week. To Thursday, next episode, the oppressor's pathology. All right. Kevin K says Dogecoin, you can't buy $1 worth of it anymore. You can't buy. Okay, so let me go back. You have to buy 10 coins or more. That dollar buy is not working anymore. Okay, so yeah, so the way I'll tell you my strategy with stuff like Dogecoin and ADA or ADA is I try to buy, especially since there's still penny coins. Well, not ADA, but Dogecoin. When it comes to these kind of penny coins, I try to buy 1,000 coins at a time. And so, that's, if Dogecoin is 6 cents, that's $60 or whatever. So I never really buy the dollar amounts. But you want to try to get in those thousands of coins, man. You want to get in those thousands of coins, because if it breaks, even if it just goes to $100, even if it caps out at $100 a coin, and you had a couple thousand of them, you have a couple 100,000. You have a couple 100,000. So, that's how you want to look at that. It says order is too small. Okay. So this is the ideology of white supremacy. Now, not a lot of it is surprising rhetoric. We've heard it in some form or the other over the years. But again, it's good to thread over what these folks are talking about. And it should help you, or us as a group, come together under one umbrella, united, right, with our own ideology of white supremacists, of so-called white. And I don't like that term because I feel like I'm supporting their ideology, but they call themselves white supremacists, so that's what they are. But we're supposed to understand this stuff, not understand to get into frivolous debates with folks, but to understand it for our own upliftment. Right? We're supposed to be able, when your kid comes running home, let's say you have a kid in the public school system, and your kid comes running home and crying and talking about these white boys said I wasn't a child, I was a nigga and all this kind of stuff, and they talked about how dumb we are. For you to uplift your child, you need to already have known what they think and have the points to counter their bullshit talking points, right? To heal, right? To heal the psyche and the emotion and the ego of your children. This is why this conversation is important. You need to know what they're talking about, know how to counter it, not to get in arguments with them, like I said, but to bring up your own people. Yeah, they are white nationalists, right? The so-called white supremacists are really just white nationalists. They're trying to protect, right, their own folks. If you listen to what's going on here, and that doesn't absolve them of being evil, by the way, but a lot of what they're talking about here is to keep their nation in order. What are we doing? What are we doing to get our nation in order and to keep it in order? See, that's the question. I want you guys to help me with a thought that I have. I have this thought that I think more women should be involved in these live streams and should be involved in the Discord. If you guys know a sensible woman, sensible black woman, Invite her to the Discord. Invite her to check out the show. Invite her to join. I appreciate all you guys, don't get me wrong, but I do believe that we need more women, because our women are the transmitters of our culture and our identity and so forth and so on. And we need more women who are going to be the teachers in the future, the mothers in the future, if not currently. We need them involved in these conversations just a tad bit more, if you get where I'm coming from. Right? For you guys who are here, did you guys happen to check out the interview I did on the Harsh Reality podcast? Did any of you get a chance to check that out? It's okay if you didn't, but I'm just asking. If you did, what were your thoughts about the interview that the Harsh Reality podcast conducted with me as the host? Any thoughts? I'll take a quick station ID break. I'll come back and wrap this up in just a moment.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Make sure you also check out the Queen's Council podcast. Queen's Council podcast also on KWAZ Women. I see Life with Nelly is still with us, and she is a young woman, so definitely I appreciate Life with Nelly. Nelly, if you know other folks who you think need to come up with this knowledge, again, you guys are going to be future moms, I imagine. Future teachers, people who pass on knowledge and culture to our children. You're going to be the future aunts, if you're not aunts already. Folks like Nelly, Life with Nelly. By the way, I think you can subscribe to Life with Nelly as well. You guys should join the Discord. We should really have a drive to bring more women on board. So if you guys have ideas that could be a drive to bring more women on board, please let me know. All right. Since there's no more comments in the chat room, I'll wrap up the show here. Just remember, on Thursday, this Thursday coming, I will be doing a paper on the oppressor's pathology. Make sure you tune in. I want to thank everyone who was here. I want to thank everyone who was here. I want to remind you guys to join the Discord. There's the link in the chat room. There's also a link in the description. Join the Discord. Come through, help us build this curriculum. This is the importance of curriculum right here. Your curriculum will counter in the children who study in this curriculum and the parents who also help and assist in their education. It will counter this notion of inferiority, right? If you want to be a part of that, join the Discord. Let us know, hey, I'm here to help build this curriculum, right? Otherwise, you can join the Discord as a fan of the show, and you could also even ask, how can I help the show? Like I said, I have this idea. We need to really get more women involved, and I'd like you guys to give me some suggestions on what do you think we need to discuss or do or what have you to get more conscious women or women seeking consciousness to watching the show, right? In any event, thank you guys for joining in today. This has been another episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Join me again on Thursday for another episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. this has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.